Happy 2025, Oren. It's the first one of the year for
Yes,
us, man.
I'm excited. How are your holidays, man?
They were good. They were good. I didn't get to do the cooking that I like to do this year. I was more the recipient of the family's good cooking.
Oh, well, that's good.
So that was nice. A lot of Italian food with my sister, which was terrific. And it's possible I had something to drink along the way too. So uh, I kept
Well,
yeah, yeah.
no, that's great. Well, I always have way too much to drink during the holidays, and I think dry January is kind of like it sets the wrong like tone for me in December because I'm like, yeah, it's dry January, so I'm gonna freaking go overboard. But it is dry January, Pete.
All
And
right, okay.
so I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it.
Oh, actually, that's good.
I went right over to Arizona Wilderness the other day,
Very good.
and they are stocked up on Arizona. And Arizona is their non-alcoholic beer.
Arizona NA,
NA, pretty clever, huh?
non-alcoholic. Very smart.
2% of the beer sales are donated to the Arizona Trail Association.
Very good.
But it is I years ago I one of my chefs back in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Um, I'm cracking this open.
Okay, yeah. Now listen, I don't want any like you're selling me the idea it's good because it's virtuous. You know me, it's got to be about the flavor. So is this legit?
Dude, it's legit. Like,
All right, tell me the
so
truth.
the one thing, the reason I just had a sip, it's fantastic.
Okay.
If I didn't tell you, let's say we go to Arizona Wilderness, right?
Okay.
I would order two Arizona drafts. Pete, you got to try this beer. It's great. You
Right.
wouldn't know the
I
difference.
wouldn't know.
No, they would
Uh,
pour it on tap. That's the one thing I like about Wilderness is you can order the Arizona and they bring it to you on tap because
Okay.
this is canned, obviously,
Right.
but they'll bring it to you from the tap and you can have lunch there. And if someone you're with is drinking a beer or dinner and you don't want to drink a beer, you can have an Arizona and not feel like a total dweeb, you
Yeah,
know?
right. That's the genius of liquid death, right? They gave those guys a can they could carry around the bars without having
Right.
it having this seem like
Right.
they're drinking cranberry juice. All right, so Arizona NA, I will
So
try it because I if I found a good one that tasted like beer, I would drink it. I would drink the heck out of it. So
So
I'm
what
gonna
I
trust you
found
and go
is
get
I
some.
did this last year. What I found is it makes it a lot easier to get through dry January. And the reason
Right.
is, and it kind of lingered on, like I was drinking this basically for the whole first quarter last year.
Okay. All
Even though
right.
I didn't turn down alcohol after January, but I wasn't seeking it out either.
Okay.
So you kind of get in this rhythm. What I found is like probably like cigarette smokers and any
Hmm.
other thing that's habitual is I like to have a beer when I'm smoking meats in the backyard or grilling.
Right.
Like it almost feels like if I'm cooking without a glass of wine or
Yeah.
beer or
Yeah.
cocktail, it feels kind of like empty. This actually, that's sad, right?
No, 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 I'm the same. Laughing because I'm the same way. I'm the same
But
way.
this does the trick. I
Right.
pour it in a glass. I don't get a buzz, but it makes me I feel comfortable. Like if I
Yes,
feel
yes.
relaxed, it gets me into the mood of
Okay.
cooking and focusing and zoning in. So I it's great. I'll bring you a 4 pack when I see you next, but
Okay. All
it's
right.
worth the trip to
This is
Wilderness.
what I want to do. This is the way I want to receive this beer is that when we can, I want to do a taste test
Yeah.
where the NA and a non-NA are in glasses and I don't know which is which. And I want to guess which
Let
one
me
is
make
the
sure. Let
NA.
me check
Yeah,
again.
see, yeah. Is it gonna rise to that standard?
Yeah, I mean, look, it tastes like a beer,
Okay.
smells like a beer. I think
I'll
it'll
give it the
work.
benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
I'll give it a 20% uh, zone of difference.
Yeah,
Well,
we can't give you like a high test IPA.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
got to be, but this tastes like
Okay.
a
Yeah, a
lager.
like
It's
to like. Yeah, not a
like an
church
ale
music,
or a lager. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Cool.
it's
So second, speaking of smoking,
right,
um, I when we talk about smoking, it's obviously smoking meats, right?
right, right.
other stuff. But
Right.
I went to for Christmas every year. I do a different. We always do a ham,
Okay.
but then we always do a different beef
Okay.
and a different cut. And this year I was like, let's do a brisket. I wanted to smoke a brisket, so I 4 weeks ahead, just to be safe, I called the meat shop, placed my order because they do the local grass raised
That's
thing.
right.
And they break them down. They break down a full beef a week, and that's it. They sell out. They sell out. And so I ordered that. And David, who we've talked about,
Yes.
who's the head butcher over there, he must have seen my name and he carved out. When I called him, I was like, "Yeah, I'm looking for like a 10 to 15 pound brisket." This sucker was like 23
What?
pounds. Yeah, it was like what was that Blue the ox,
Yeah.
Paul Bunyan's
Yeah.
ox.
Yeah.
I think
Right.
that's what they found. This thing was gigantic. I wish I could show you. I don't know if the picture's going to come through,
Oh,
but
yeah.
that's it on my smoker.
My God.
And dude, it was outrageously big. Like the biggest brisket I've ever. That's another shot of it
Is
right
this
there.
is this podcast privileges? Is that what it is? He saw you're a famous podcaster,
I
and
guess maybe
yeah,
whatever. I
I'll be
mean,
looking for my leftovers then as your co as your co-host.
I'm always, it pays to be nice to the butcher, I guess. So
Indeed.
anyway, it was fantastic. 24-hour smoke.
Right.
Now, as I've mentioned to you before, the cheat on that is you smoke it for 8 hours. Any piece of meat, even as big as that, is not going to take on any more smoke after 7 or 8 hours.
Okay.
So after that, you're just heating it. So most people wrap the brisket anyway after that 7 or 8 hour mark just to keep you've already got your bark. Now you're trying to just get internal temps going, right?
Right.
And get through that, that wall that the brisket goes through. It's hard to get it past like 165 degrees. So what I do is I started earlier in the day, feed the wood because you got to constantly feed it wood. And then at around 11 p.m., this was on Christmas Eve, just throw it in the oven at 200 degrees just to keep the cooking
Okay.
process going overnight, but not overdoing it. And because on the smoker, it's at around 250 degrees. And then the next morning, fire the smoker back up, get it back in there, and just keep it at a nice low 200, 220 for the rest of the day. It was perfect.
Amazing.
So, yeah, it was a great brisket, one of my best. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I'm saying that because it was a grass-raised brisket.
Yeah.
And I think there's this misnomer out there that you've got to, when you're doing a brisket or some big piece of meat like that, you've got to have a lot of fat and this and that. This had a lot of fat,
Okay.
um, great fat, like and what
Intramuscular.
I
Nice.
did this time is I put it on two cast iron skillets when I was smoking it
Okay.
to collect all the drippings.
Oh,
And I've
nice.
never done that before. So now we filtered those drippings and we have this great basically brisket tallow,
Oh my God.
that's just to die for. Like cooking eggs in it is unbelievable. So
So when
and
you collected those, did you put them through a cheesecloth or what'd you do to strain them? Or
I
just
don't know.
through a
I'll have to ask
sieve?
Diane. I think she might have done a sieve,
Okay.
but yeah, it's just to get like the pieces out. We're
Sure.
not trying to ultra filter it,
Right.
but yeah, it's delicious, and so we've been using that to cook with for the last few days.
Damn, that
But
sounds that
yeah,
sounds so
it's
awesome.
really good. So
Well,
yeah, so a great great holiday.
that
Glad you
sounds
enjoyed it.
amazing. Oh my
Yeah,
God. Well, I mean, I know that we'd qualify you as a cook, perhaps not, you might not take the mantle of chef, but
no,
you're a proficient cook and your career in one way, shape, or form has always revolved around the restaurant business. I mean, I think,
yes,
your whole professional life has touched in one way, shape, or form the restaurant businesses and at lots of different scales. Having run the Restaurant Association in Washington, D.C., I mean, must have given you incredible field of vision, having owned restaurants, having operating chains. I mean, you're as expert a person as I could find to talk about opening a restaurant.
hmm,
And I want to talk to you about that idea because restaurants are notorious. for those of us, especially outside the industry, for a high rate of failure. And as somebody who has opened restaurants, run restaurants, all of that, can you talk a little bit about like what gives a person the confidence? What what is a rational person who goes, you know what, I'm going to tie my livelihood to this thing that's so risky, uh, and that they take a look at those statistics and still do it. Like what is it about the restaurant community that their DNA is in common like that?
Well, we've talked about in our one of our earlier podcasts about the romantic aspects of
Yes,
restaurants, right? And so it's very romantic. I go to a restaurant, I like it. I just cashed in on my, you know,
right,
uh, my shares of my startup company.
right,
I
yeah,
got a couple mils sitting around. I love this chef. He's such a nice guy. This place always seems to be busy. I'd like to open a restaurant with
right,
him. Now sometimes it's not a chef-driven restaurant. Sometimes it's going into, I used to operate Freddy's Frozen Custard and Steak Burgers, which is a franchise concept.
right,
And one of the biggest ways they would get new franchisees is they just had a little plaque at the front door and said, if you like this, you should call us about owning one. And that's how they got a lot of new franchisees who had never been in the restaurant business.
that's
So I
interesting.
think there's a romantic side of it of um, if you see a busy restaurant, you assume that it's
Hmm.
a profitable restaurant,
Right,
right? Oh, they must be killing it.
right,
But that is not the case. The reasons restaurants have a high rate of failure, I think there's a couple different reasons because I've had failed restaurants
hmm.
and I'm a what I would
Yeah,
say
you're
is
an
a
expert.
seasoned restaurateur, right? I've worked for great restaurant groups. I've worked for Marriott hotels and was a director of restaurants for them. I saw failed restaurants with Marriott
Yes,
and successful restaurants with Marriott,
right,
right? So, and that's within a brand where you have a captured audience, like,
right, yeah.
you know, and so there's many ways for a restaurant to fail. I would say that the assumption should be is that this restaurant is probably going to fail if I don't mitigate my risk as much as possible,
Yeah.
mitigate that failure. So I think when we talk about restaurant failure, we need to talk about mitigation and also about preparation. Like what should you be doing if you want to open a restaurant or purchase a restaurant? What is that due diligence that you need to do and before you sign on the dotted line
So
and
yeah, if
say,
we take a step back then and like if when you in all these years, and good Lord, you're so old, there's many years now in in your
this
portfolio,
is true.
and you're junior to me, so I say that
That's
with
why I'm
all the
drinking
yeah,
non-alcoholic beer,
I
Pete.
say that with all the love in my heart I can offer. But now you have a wide um, body of knowledge, right? And you have a lot of experiences watching these things in all different directions. So there are clear patterns in terms of either how people are approaching it or that you're observing in both successes and failure, because I think there must be a science to it, because Danny Meyer opens restaurants and those restaurants have a high rate of success,
Hmm.
and then so there must be some science to this, but there must be art as well. I mean, there's restaurants that are maybe so personality driven and unique that and well positioned that they do well, maybe even without all the science in place, just because there's such a triumph of creativity or excellence or whatever. But I'd like to hear if there's any sort of obvious patterns you could talk about.
There is absolutely no clear or obvious pattern.
Okay.
So you mentioned Danny Meyer. He's a great example. I was listening to an interview with him recently. Arguably, I'm a big fan of his,
Mhm.
arguably one of the most influential restaurateurs of our
And tell
generation.
people who he is.
So
Tell them what
Danny
came from. Yeah.
Meyer is most well known now for opening Shake Shack. Shake
Right.
Shack is his concept that started as literally a little, you know, uh, hot dog vendor in Madison Square Park,
Right.
right, in New York. And now it's become this publicly traded, monster
Yeah.
and
Just yeah.
very well known. But long before he developed Shake Shack, Danny Meyer was an innovator in the restaurant business. He's really the father of converting fine dining in like the 80s,
Hmm.
and then going into the 90s. Of turning creating a category called upscale casual.
Right.
And so it's an approachable fine dining restaurant. You get the fine dining level of service, but with more of a casual menu price and a casual dress. And before that, it was like McDonald's or, Morton Steakhouse.
Right.
Like
Right. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
was not a lot in between. There was the diner and the deli, but he really created a new category, and it's hard to envision why that was so unique at the time,
Right.
um, because it's so ubiquitous now.
Yes.
Almost
Yes.
every restaurant you go to that's a sit-down restaurant is basically modeled around Danny Meyer's original model.
Okay.
And he was very well informed and very well trained in food when he
Hmm.
opened his first restaurant. And even with that, it was a long time before he opened a second restaurant. I mean, close to a decade, I believe.
Wow.
And even then, and I'll end the Danny Meyer discussion on this. He's had two huge failed restaurants in New York, at least two.
Right.
And this is after he had some wildly successful concepts like Gramercy Tavern
Yes.
and all those. So, even a guy like Danny Meyer with all this success and all this planning and hiring the right chefs and having the right location and the right lease and all these things
Yeah.
had two epic failures.
Okay. And
And
all the
so
resources, like, I mean, he had the resources. It
all
wasn't,
every
yeah.
yeah. So I think that when you ask about a clear pattern of success, there is none, you
Okay.
know. Um, but you can extend your runway.
Okay.
And I think that if you go in with the right concept, right? Let's say a lot of people will buy a restaurant that is already running. Let's say the family is, ready to retire, or they're just, that happens a lot.
Right.
It's a husband and a wife. They've been running this restaurant for 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I have family members that did that. And then, they say, we're working our asses off. We're 70 years old. We've got to get out of this, or we're going to die in this kitchen, right?
Right.
So that's a lot of times that's what happens is you go in and you buy somebody's existing restaurant. In doing that, the way to mitigate failure is to work with them for a long period of time, because a lot of their success is not necessarily just around the quality of their product and
Hmm.
the quality of their service. It's because of the owners.
Right.
The owners have a have an attachment with those customers, and people in a sense come to see them
Yes.
as much as they come to experience the restaurant. They might be able to even get a better product somewhere else, but the attachment is to that working owner.
Yeah.
So in that case, it's important to spend time with them and to for the customers to see you as a trusted successor.
And so in a situation like that, I think what's interesting to me is that in that circumstance, there's no way you become the owner. Like you're going to have to figure out a personal, if I want to call it, artistic value proposition back to those customers that retain their interests sufficiently to come back. Because you're a human being is a human being, and I've walked into restaurants that are certainly driven by the force of the family's personality, the person's personality, and it's shaped in that manner. And so if you're going to take over that type of thing, does a person look to transfer the equity, so to speak, of the personal equity of, hey, I liked coming in to see this person, but now I'm coming in to see you, or or how would you anticipate that transition? Because
So
there's got to be
I've been
some leakage,
involved in
some
this
breakage, right?
several
Oh, tell
times,
me,
like
yeah.
here locally with Chompies,
Mm,
when we we bought Chompies from the original founders who are icons in the
Yes.
Valley and, who owned and operated that business for 34, 35 years by the time we
Yeah.
acquired it. And now I knew the business. I was fortunate that I'd worked for them in the past, but we had to really show that with new ownership, we were not only carrying on the traditions that they put in place of the brand and the concept, but we were going to take it to the next level.
Okay.
So one of the things that Chompies had done was kind of let the restaurants go. They
Hmm.
weren't upgrading the furniture or,
Right.
they kind of looked like they were 35 years old and serving fantastic food, doing great volume. So built a brand new mother location that,
Yeah.
in Phoenix and
That
just
came out
went
awesome.
over the top on it. So now people are saying, okay, these guys are taking it seriously, but you may not have the resources to do something like that. What I would say is in smaller businesses where I've come in as a manager and we're acquiring an existing well-respected business, is you don't change a lot in the guest eyes. You
Right.
start from the motor and you work outwards,
Okay.
right? So, if people like they're used to the current menu, you just build efficiencies behind the scenes and you slowly show them that hospitality, service times, are going to be better. And to the
Hmm.
point where they say, I really loved the old owners. I
Right.
had great chats with them, but you guys, I can finally get out of here in less than 45
Okay.
minutes,
Okay.
So that's how you build trust. And now a brand that they're comfortable with for a different reason now becomes the brand that they fall in love with for
Okay.
other reasons.
Okay.
So and I've seen a lot of brands continue on that way.
So yeah,
Um,
there's an incremental improvement that has to occur that says, okay, you lost this thing, your connection with
mhm,
so and so. However, we've retained your connection to the product, to the food, to the
yes.
experience, and we've offered you some other thing that you didn't have before, a quicker turnaround, or whatever it might be,
And what I
you
would
know.
suggest is if you're even interested in, like, if you have your eyes on a restaurant in your community or wherever, and it's a mom and pop or maybe they have one or two, I would seriously consider going and working with them,
Yes,
like saying, "Hey, I'd like to buy this restaurant from you when you're ready.
right.
But, in the meantime, you know, I'd like to at least work with you so I can understand what the business is about." Because one of the things that I've seen a lot is a really successful restaurant
Hmm.
that they drag it, the original owner drags it out maybe 6 or 7 years too long.
Right.
And you look back at the books 10 years ago and you're like, this thing was killing it, and now it's not
Yeah.
because they love it, but they haven't been able to put the same amount of energy into it. So the business has fallen off. So, you don't want to buy a restaurant when it's on its death spiral, right? You want to buy it before that so that the price might be a little higher, but I, you know, that I
Yes.
heard a saying recently, you can't there's no such thing as a free boat, like, or the worst boat is a free
Yeah,
boat.
the worst boat is a free boat.
So,
So, well, I mean, that makes sense. And I think so as we talk about the choice to go get into the restaurant business, I mean, this romantic idea might come in by virtue of the fact that you had such a good experience somewhere and you want to own that experience or convey that experience to people in
right,
the future. But when I think about my own restaurant fantasies, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking of, I think about wanting to open something out of my imagination, something
right,
that I've like, I have in my head, oh, I'd like to do this. So for people, when you think about the choices of, okay, there may be choice one to go and purchase something you're aware of and kind of make edits to the thing itself. Another choice is hey, I'm going to go build this thing based on my opinion of what it should be like. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, and so in that situation, um, if you're going to build a concept from scratch, which I've done plenty of times, when I've had success doing that, it's when I have a marketable partner,
Okay.
um, meaning let's just, in my case, the chef,
Right.
right? The chef is a known entity. The media likes the chef because of things he's done in the
Yeah.
past, or the
Right.
local food writing media, that they're going to really help you, establish a strong base of sales right from the beginning if they like your chef. I'll
Right.
give you a story of this. So I opened a restaurant as a sweat equity partner in Washington, D.C., and A++ location in Georgetown. I
Okay.
mean, M Street and 31st. Like you couldn't be at a hotter location at the time in
Right.
DC. Um, and then uh, incredible concept, 10,000 square feet, like huge, incredible build out in these two old row houses, a trip through Marco Polo's Silk Road. Every dining room was a different culture along the Silk Road. The menu was reflective of that. Um, Incredible wine list. Everything was perfect with
Right.
this concept development. But the owner, before I got involved, the owner hired a chef who I had worked with before,
Right.
who had worked for Marriott with me
Hmm.
and had never really cut his teeth in a high-end, like nice fine dining restaurant. He had done fine dining for Marriott.
Right.
The food writers in town completely boycotted the restaurant.
What?
They said, how could you put such a beautiful restaurant in the best location in DC and put this untested chef in there who obviously knows his stuff. He's been a chef for 20 some years,
Right.
but is not, he didn't come up, he doesn't have the pedigree,
That's
right?
so
So
interesting.
they
So
completely shunned him.
they didn't even want to
Sh-
give him a chance.
Nope. The
Huh.
the initial reviews were, they got like the lackey, like the newest
Right.
college grad to write the reviews. They got, no one read them, and they were pretty lackluster reviews. Like,
Okay.
this restaurant could be so much more if they just had the right chef. So
Wow.
my point there is, now the restaurant, it was still successful.
Right.
All the other things outweighed that, and the decor and everything was just so appealing that people, and we made the hospitality was off the charts, so you can mitigate for that, right? But the on the other hand, the I've, in restaurants I've opened on my own,
Hmm.
I found that success has come when I have a strong partner who the media, and who has a strong following in the community. And so, like when I opened Molotong in Arlington, Virginia, I opened it with, my partner at the time was a master chef from the Sichuan region of
Right.
China.
Yeah.
And he had like four little dive Chinese restaurants and had developed this cult following in the DC area. And when they heard that I was partnering with him, because everyone knew I was running these other fine dining restaurants, they're like, holy cow, this is a marriage made in heaven, because we're going to get this unbelievable Szechuan cuisine with a guy who actually knows how to build a decent restaurant where customers can feel comfortable and you're not falling through your seat,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's not, everything you would expect in a dive restaurant. So we got huge fanfare right off the bat, lots of media attention. And as a result, even though it's a C location, it did really well. We're in year 15 now.
Wow.
But I would say that we have more trouble uh, maintaining our sales level there now because he's not in the business anymore.
That's
So,
interesting. So no, is that so
yeah,
in these scenarios, we have a scenario where somebody is attracted to something that exists and it's a question of execution, and it's a question of understanding how where is the equity in this restaurant? Is it in the personality? Is it in the product? Is it
yeah,
in the way people feel on the way in? And there has to be a way to retain that value in a transfer of ownership, and that's one, I think, set of skills and intelligences. And then in the Silk Road restaurant, which is a restaurant I wish I could have eaten at because that place
Yeah.
sounded
There was a
amazing.
hanging, the chef's table was a hanging bird cage over a Moroccan bazaar.
That I mean, yes, that place
Yeah,
was
I'll have to
built
show you
for
some
me.
pictures.
Oh my God, I got to see that. I would have been, but in this instance, you had product, you had, um, you had service, you had everything that you needed, minus sort of the tailwinds of exposure, the tailwinds of like ways in which people could have someone they trust, the food
Mhm.
writer, say, go here. And yet, the fundamentals of that restaurant were so strong that it succeeded even with the whatever the headwinds of a lack of sort of exposure.
Yeah, you have to, yes, if you're going into that, you have to be prepared for a high level of business. And because it you can let people come in with a high expectation.
Right.
I'll tell you another story
But let me just
locally
ask you
here.
real
Yeah,
quick
yeah,
though
yeah.
about so but thirdly about Malatong, I mean, you're 15 years in with that and it's extraordinary track record of it doing well. But in the beginning, it was tied to the notion that this was truly Szechuan food. This was a chef
Hmm.
from the region bringing something authentic paired with somebody who's going to make sure your experience of that food was going to
Right.
be good. So as the chef has departed the scene, like how what threat does that have? What threat does that pose to your restaurant there?
Well, so he departed the scene after a year of us being in
Oh,
business.
okay, okay,
Yeah, but we would have never gotten the fanfare initially and gotten off the ground without it.
okay,
Then, we had a business dispute and we had a dispute resolution process. I
sure,
exercised it and he was out. Now, he wasn't actively the chef at the restaurant. He was still running his other restaurant. So thankfully, he had trained another chef, and
yeah,
that's who, we just retained that person. And now we've built on that, right? But we were successful. After he left, we were far more successful.
okay,
um, our sales in year 5 and 6 and 7 were unbelievable, but our sales in year 2, 3, and 4 were really lackluster.
okay,
So, but now the sales have dipped since the pandemic. The pandemic hit that area hard.
yeah,
It's been hard to get dine-in sales back. So that's my point is that even a restaurant, we had tremendous success in that restaurant for 6, 7 years.
hmm
And now we're having to rebuild it and tell the story over again because it's a
okay,
transient neighborhood and it's a very political town, obviously. So it basically turns the whole neighborhood turns over, the whole community there in Arlington turns over every 4 years.
so you got to
So
reestablish your
you got to,
reputation
yeah. So
every.
as far, no one even knows we're there now, and
That's
so
wild.
you can't, if you have early success, you can't sit around and expect that to last unless you're in a like a North Scottsdale community where there's longevity.
Sure.
You have to anticipate that you're going to have to reintroduce yourself, especially in an urban environment, to that community every couple of years because you're going to have people coming and going.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
New York's famously, I mean, being born in New York, the things have their rise and fall, and the transientness of populations, like in the big city, you often it things have their day and then they pass, and then it's the old timers that refer to, oh, this used to be so and so. But it seems like even in a because when I think about Manhattan, I think, oh, you got what 8 million people on this island. I mean,
right.
this is a captured audience. How do you not make something work here? But things have their moment and then it goes away. So you're always, it feels like a business that it's relentless. Like you never have a time in which the business doesn't demand your full and complete sort of, hey, you always need to be paying attention to it.
It is a hands-on owner operated type of thing. Like if you're doing it as an investment,
It's probably a bad idea.
you're likely going to lose. You have to be fully engaged in the business. Um, because it's a perishable product.
Yeah.
And
Interesting. Well
know,
put.
so that's the one thing that smacks people upside the head 6, 8, 9 months in is holy shit, I was in contracting my whole life, or I was an engineer, I work for this big company, but I never dealt with perishable products. All of a sudden, I've got to throw away all this food because it's expired,
Yeah. Right. Right.
and that could have been all your profits for that month,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's learning to work with perishable products is the key. It's like, that's why grocery stores are so low margin, is because of the amount of food they have to discard,
Sure.
So
Well, you were
yeah.
going to tell me about a local story. I just wanted
Yeah,
to
so
like
just
keep
one
keep
more
these.
note
Yeah.
on patterns of success.
Right.
So there's a local chef restaurateur who very accomplished chef, you know, he has a good investor behind him, has two wildly successful upscale restaurants in the valley. Um, has gotten tons of accolades. Right next door to his flagship, most popular restaurant, he has like a bar, lounge type of place
Hmm.
that he just closed down his second iteration, two completely different concepts. He just closed down the second version and he's like, I just can't make a go of it. So this is literally right next door to his juggernaut,
Oh my gosh.
right? And he did a wonderful job with it. So there's this, I can't remember who talks about it. Uh, but in a recent podcast, Founders podcast I listened to, he was talking, who's the big Mark Andreessen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mark Andreessen says, I don't care how good your team is, I don't care how good your product is, there has to be a market.
Right.
The
Right.
market has
Yeah.
to be there.
Yeah.
So what I would say to you, Pete, going back to your question is you have to understand what the market is and what they're looking for.
Right.
And if you have a big heavy hitter partner who's going to be the face of the concept, you
Hmm.
can go into a C location and you'll still have that initial media pool. As long as the hospitality is right, people will make their way to you.
Right.
It's a good value, the whole thing, whether it's a fine dining restaurant or a bakery or whatever. Um, so that's a key component. But otherwise, if you're going to develop a concept, you have to make sure there's a market for it in that area,
Right.
because that one example that I just told you prove it's a market driven issue. It's
Right. So
obviously
there
not
was, yeah, not expertise, not
there.
product. This person knows what he's doing. The product's
Yeah,
good. All the expertise and
incredibly
probably
successful other
in
two
other
restaurants.
two restaurants.
Yeah.
So, I mean, prior, whichever direction you might be inclined in terms of a person looking to open a restaurant, it sounds to me like, there's some definite steps that someone would have to take. I mean, one is, we talked a little bit about clarity. Are you uh, are you looking to create this artistic experience in my mind that's just something that's out of your own imagination, or do you want to kind of take things over? We haven't talked about franchises, but that's another route where the
Hmm.
playbook is built for you. There's a
Yeah.
lot of weight that goes into solving for business basics, the accounting,
Hmm.
the sourcing, all of those things. But like what represents sort of the prior to opening something, some of the just obvious steps that someone should go through?
So I'm a bootstrap type of guy, but one thing I've learned myself the hard way, as well as through some great mentors, is spend 20, save up 20 or 30 grand,
Hmm.
borrow it from your parents, whatever you need to do,
Right.
and go through the process of writing a business plan.
Hmm.
If you can have somebody, give you some help with it, write a pro forma P&L, right?
Right.
Like there's plenty of programs out there that you could download, like restaurantowner.com has a great one where you just download the P&L and you plug in all the numbers and it
Okay.
tells you here's where you're going to end up, right? And it's incredible. I've used it for like 25 years. Um, and you have to build your menu. You have to, it forces you to figure it out, right? So what I would say is if I want to open a restaurant, whether I'm going to buy an existing one and kind of update the concept, or I'm going to create my own concept. I'm going to buy a restaurant that's built out, but I'm going to put my own concept in there. So write the business plan, write the menu, meet with your distributors, have the recipes costed out, and understand what is the volume level I need to do in order to break even in this restaurant and
Right.
maybe pay myself a few bucks, right?
Right.
Just so I know I'm not losing my ass in the first 2, 3 years, because that's how long it takes to build a business. You can,
To,
even if you start off gangbusters, Pete, like let's say the first 2 months, you're like, holy shit, we're so busy. I can't stop. I can't even lock the doors.
right.
Like they're just flooding us. You will still see a curve that goes down after 6, 8 months. It's known as the honeymoon period.
Sure.
Restaurants have the most significant honeymoon period. So you may
Okay.
open in a underserved neighborhood. Like if you opened up right now around McKellips and Lindsay or McKellips and Gilbert, you
Right.
would kill it.
Okay.
But eventually you're going to see that taper down, no matter how busy you are, no
Okay.
matter how strong the concept is. And then your hospitality and consistency is what's going to bring you back up. And
Okay.
then you could exceed those opening sales, but you have to have a 2 to 3 year runway.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
when you talk about, I mean, you're talking about volume, being able to estimate sort of essentially revenue against expenses and all of that. How does a person think about market intelligence about the demand of a particular location against a certain type of food or experience without opening it? So I'm curious, how does someone be
Well,
careful in that regard?
so my son, the reason I mentioned McKellips, my son Cameron he just moved to that area like 6 months ago from Tempe, him and his wife. They moved into a really nice neighborhood. They're renting, but they literally are, and they don't cook at home barely at all.
Okay.
They're the working young professionals, want to go out and eat,
Right.
would love to support local restaurants. There's about six that all suck. I
Okay.
mean, literally, they're like, we tried, like we really tried. We had the worst hospitality service at this one restaurant. We went back again because we can walk there. We were so desperate for this restaurant
To
to
be
be
good.
okay,
Yeah.
and it's not. So to me, what that says is if you go get to learn a market and you find that these restaurants, there's a desire, there's a population there that's seeking a great experience. The
Right.
demographics are good, which are so easy to get now.
Right.
I
That's true.
mean, Placer AI is revolutionized how you can look at a market. So when you hire a broker to help you look for a restaurant, remember
Hmm.
you're not paying a broker until you don't ever pay a broker as a buyer.
Right.
The
Right.
seller is paying your broker, just like a real estate agent. They should have Placer AI.
Okay.
Okay. And what that does is it tracks cell phone data and it shows you where are people coming to this restaurant from and where do they go afterwards. So, and then and you can compare it to other similar restaurants in other communities that you know. So there's a lot of more intelligence around how to pick a location now, but really you want to go into an underserved market that but it's a strong demographic. It's underserved from a restaurant standpoint. And then that to me is how you get the initial burst that you need, and
Okay.
then you just have to make sure that you're prepared for that.
So
Like,
is that a financial articulation? So you're like number of people times dollars to be spent times options of eating. Is that the
yeah, but it's
calculus that
it's
you?
also like you have to study the market and you have to talk to people.
Okay.
Like, so that's why I think it's good to buy, if you're going to do it, buy a restaurant for the first time or start a restaurant, do it in a community that you're very
Yeah.
familiar with,
Yeah.
whether it's your own or one that you lived in the past, because you're going to understand that community
I
and
agree.
what their needs are,
Yeah.
right? Do they eat out a lot, or is this like a barbecue competition community, or are they all at home cooks, right?
Right.
So it's interesting because different demographics spend money differently at restaurants, and you'd be surprised. The middle upper class tends to cook at home a little bit more, but folks who are both, you have maybe two working adults, they're living check to check, they tend to eat out more
Yeah.
because they don't have the time. It's a time value proposition,
Right.
right? So you can't just look at a market and say, oh, the average median income, household
Okay.
income here is
Okay.
160,000 a year. This is going to be a great market because they have disposable income. Some of the slowest restaurants I've ever operated that flamed out were in very affluent
Oh, no
markets.
kidding.
Yeah,
Okay.
because people are like, well, I don't mind driving an extra 15 minutes to go to this great restaurant that I love, or I'm going to cook at home, whatever. They don't necessarily, and then if you don't have a good employee base in some of those markets either. If
Yeah.
if you can't get employees, you're screwed too.
Yes.
Like
Yes. Yeah. Right.
so if you're in a very affluent area that doesn't have a lot of public transportation, it's going to be hard to get staff. You got to have dishwashers, cooks, servers, bussers, all that stuff. So there's a lot of that planning. So going back to my original thought, spend $30,000 and a year. That should be the minimum amount of money and
Okay.
time you spend to determine if you're going to go into this. And that way you could tell your wife or husband, I'm going to lose $30,000.
Right.
I'm going to spend it to make sure we don't lose a million.
Right. Right.
So if you look at it as a reverse investment,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you're investing in yourself not losing $1 million because
Right.
that's how much you're going to lose. So
Yeah.
if the restaurant flames out, right?
Right.
So if you if so that is I would say that's the best advice I could give for starting a restaurant.
Yeah, and this ties into so many themes of this podcast because when we talk about success here, and you and I both really like the term virtuous cycle, right? That one good thing leads to another good thing, leads to another good thing in the way that one bad decision often begets another bad decision, and you end up in a vicious cycle. So in the virtuous cycle that we talk about often, it's about, um, maybe you might think of it as the vertical integration of your health. Like where is your food coming from? Knowing, shake the hand that feeds you, so,
Hmm.
sort of thing. And then who's preparing it at the chef level, knowing those people, understanding effectively how everything came together at your plate as being a fundamental part of being healthy. And what you're describing to me here has an analogy in my mind that, like, understand the community that you serve. And if you understand the needs of that community, you'll be able to serve that community well,
Hmm.
and they will, reap the pleasure of eating at what you create, and you
Hmm.
will create a level of prosperity for yourself that if you ignore this, if you treat it as just a math problem without a soul, you don't really do the work of the people work, the community work.
Hmm.
It seems like you can't really expect success. I mean, is that a fair paraphrase of this
Yeah, because
$30,000?
even if you invest in a franchise operation, you
Yeah,
become a franchisee. Let's I'm going to tell you right now because I'd never been in franchising until the last 10, 12 years of my restaurant career. Even in any, I can tell you, you can ask, I guarantee you, you ask any operator who is a franchisee or owns restaurants throughout the country
right.
or throughout a state,
Hmm.
if you have 20 restaurants that are part of a franchise model, 25% of them are going to carry the rest.
Okay. Oh, that's
Okay.
interesting. So
Yeah.
75%, even with the same business model, the
Yes.
same 75% are going to
The middle
be,
50, and these
that's
are
interesting. Okay.
fairly rough numbers, but it's pretty much the same.
Okay.
And I've spoken with a lot of operators of different concepts, and it's pretty much the same. 25% carry the rest of the company. The middle 50% hold their own. They're
Okay.
basically a break-even proposition when you look at it from a cash flow standpoint.
Right.
And the bottom
Or
25
sucking cash out of this
are
thing.
basically evening out the top 25. So you ask yourself, well, then why would I even have the bottom 25? Some of those bottom 25 were the best locations on paper.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is that
So
a mismatch in terms of understanding what those locations really wanted and you forcing a
yes,
concept into
you're
it? Is that,
forcing a concept. It's
yeah.
typically because it's a young brand. The biggest mistake you can make as a franchisee is sign on with a young brand
Uh-huh.
or a relatively young brand, or they're young in your market, right? Maybe they've been around for 40 years in New Hampshire, but
Right.
this is, you're opening the first one in Arizona. The
Interesting.
worst thing you can do is commit to, I'm going to open 8 in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Worst thing you could do, because what it does is it puts this pressure on you to develop, and you just end up taking locations that you sell yourself on.
Yeah. Yes.
They're
Yes.
expensive.
Right.
And so if you are interviewing to become a franchisee of a concept that you like, let's say you went to Maine, right? And
Hmm.
you saw this great lobster roll concept
Right.
and you want to open it in your community and they franchise. Okay, great. Say, hey, look, I want to commit to 8, but I want a clause in our contract that says if I'm not exceeding this volume,
Right.
that I can you'll give me an extension on the time it is before. I want to be able to, everyone needs to be breaking even or cash flow positive before I
Before the
open the
next time.
next
Yeah.
one.
Very smart.
The biggest trap in franchising is okay, I got to meet this timeline or I'm going to lose my rights, right?
Okay.
So
Right.
this
Right.
is pressure tactic. And so if you find a franchisor that's willing to play ball with you, which typically would be a new a company that's recently started franchising,
Hmm.
and they have no prospects in your market, you came to them,
Right.
then you could kind of dictate the terms a little bit more and say, you're not going to Arizona anyway. Let me just take my time and do it right.
Yeah.
Just, I don't want a yearly, milestone that I have to hit.
Right.
Let's just say that in 10 years, I'll have 8 restaurants,
Yeah.
you
So,
know,
I mean, that's in the best interest of the franchisor too, which is interesting.
not necessarily,
But I
because
mean,
the
if
franchisor doesn't give a shit if you're losing money or making money. They're
even if it
they're
closes,
collecting. Well, if it closes, they'll just sell it to somebody to sell the rights to somebody else.
yeah.
But the franchisor is making money off your top line, not off your bottom line.
Yeah, it just seems like from a brand equity perspective you want to have as few failures in the marketplace as
Well,
possible,
I
but
would agree with that.
maybe it doesn't matter.
No,
So,
it does matter. I agree, it does matter, especially to a new brand. But
right,
if you're an owner, like let's say you owned a concept here in Arizona and somebody from Milwaukee is visiting
right.
and they say, I love your concept. I want to open one in Milwaukee. It doesn't hurt you at all if they fail. You were probably never going to open a restaurant in Milwaukee.
Yeah, right, right.
So, your care level is at about 0, especially if you have, 8, 9, 10 of them here in Arizona, you're doing okay. And you were like, yeah, I was going to expand to New Mexico,
Yeah.
Colorado, and California. I don't give a shit about Milwaukee. So, so
Yeah.
that's what you're going to get into is they'll be like, yeah, it's your problem. Close it. I'm probably never going to open a restaurant in Arizona anyway, you
So,
know?
all right, we have these different sort of roads, right? We have the restaurant exists. All right,
Yeah.
I would
Like
do
buy
that.
an existing
By an
concept.
existing concept.
Yep.
We've got like, I have an idea in my head. I just want to do it. There's that concept. There is a franchise concept. Hey, this thing's a
Right.
business, proven business. Walked into Freddy's. I liked it. Seems like, hey, why not have my life revolve around
Sure.
something that I feel good about? Um, and it seems like planning that is thorough and meticulous, not just on the business side, but also in the human side of understanding the people in the community matters a lot to the execution of it. I when Could you pick one of the restaurants you opened and maybe give us a brief kind of journey of, hey, I had the idea at this point. These are the ways that I did my market research and decided on my concept and whatnot. And then a as you come through that, uh, I know you're a bootstrap person, and but not everybody, some people are going to go look for financing. So maybe you could tell that story and then weave in what does it mean tell that story to someone who you might be asking to finance it. Because
Yeah, for
I
sure.
mean,
Well,
you're going to have to be able to defend your point of view to somebody who's going to write a check for you to take this idea from, being an idea to being a business.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna so before I answer that, I'm gonna mention a couple other things about the 20 or 30 grand that you should
Yes,
spend.
yes, yes, please.
Just to close that thought is one is so we discussed it doesn't cost you any money to hire a broker. Hire a good broker who knows
Hmm.
restaurants, right? Because that's just free expertise. They're going to educate you on the market. And as long as you're actively looking at locations, they're going to be by your side, right?
Right,
Um, Brokers understand that it's a long game for them. They're looking at how much they're going to make with you over 10 years, not over the next 6 months.
right.
So you put your business plan together, you meet with a distributor. The distributors are very savvy these days. They will actually help you build your business plan and recipe and menus.
Okay,
Even though I have a lot of experience doing that, I still do it with my distributor every time I'm going to open a
okay,
restaurant
okay.
because they have the tools and then they know what other restaurants are doing. So I get their expertise. At the end of the day, I'll do what I want to do, but why not have them
Yes,
help me for free? It
right.
doesn't cost me a penny to do it. Um, but two of the biggest things is one, hire an architect
Oh,
and
yes.
get the plans done ahead of time. A generic set of plans that says, in general, I'm looking for 1,500 or 2,000 square foot restaurant. I'm looking if I put it in a rectangle in a shopping center, architect, I want you to engineer it. I want to put all the equipment in there because when you bring that to a landlord or a prospective landlord, they're going to be very impressed.
So to
And
understand
yeah,
what you just said properly, like you're saying this architect can build this restaurant in without the physical place
correct.
existing. So you're
Yeah,
saying go work with an architect so that way you have this kind of specked out. And then as you go and look at
yep,
places, you'll understand the cost differential and that this either fits what I want to build or it's going to be a much more expensive proposition to have
correct.
everything. Do I
And
understand that right?
it's going to be a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Because what happens is if you're leasing a location, you get into the lease negotiations and then you're up against other potential tenants.
Yeah.
So it's a time you have to be like on it, right? So you might have 90 or 120 days of due diligence before you have to execute that lease.
Yeah.
If you already have your building designed, your floor plan and your
Nice.
kitchen and the concept and all that, because you've taken that year and spent that money,
Right.
now you're just going back to your architect and saying, okay, here's the layout.
Can we
Um,
refine it
and
against this
you refine
specific?
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And I've recently done that. And then critical piece, another freebie is a general contractor. When you want to get recommendations from the architect, typically what I do is if I don't know any builders in the area, I go to the architect first who's built a lot of restaurants,
Right.
right? And I ask them for their recommendations on contractors, and they will always give them, and they're going to give you the general contractors that work the best with the architect.
Right.
And so that's always a great way to get your general. You want to get your contractor on board. Some contractors will charge a kind of pre-design,
Okay.
pre-opening fee, which is fine. What they'll typically do is they'll roll that into the cost of your
Okay.
build out
Okay.
if you go with them, right?
Right.
It's worth doing that because you want them involved in your lease negotiations and your
Okay.
lease walkthroughs.
Interesting. Okay.
If you do not have a general contractor and you are within a month of signing a lease, you're screwed.
Okay. So
Like
you can
literally.
sequence these things in a sense. Like you, in this year where you're spending this 30 grand and this time, I
Mhm.
mean, you're collecting plans, information, and tools before you've even found a place to put this thing. Like
Correct.
you need these tools in your tool bag before you
Yep.
even go and
And
seek
it's very
something.
impressive to a landlord
Yeah.
if you're renting. It's very impressive to a
Yeah.
landlord that you have all these things lined out, that you have a design, you have
Yeah.
your equipment list, you know exactly what electrical and plumbing and gas needs you're going to have. That to a landlord, they're going to be like, I want you in.
Does
And you
that help with the negotiation for improvements?
absolutely,
Okay,
because a
okay.
landlord does not want to lose a tenant. They don't want to kick you out,
That's right.
right? They don't want to evict you. They want to know they're going, if you have a well put together plan and you've already paid the engineer and architect, the landlord is going to give you a much better deal and they'll give you more tenant improvement
Yeah, yeah.
resources and all that.
Okay.
Um,
So there's a
anyway,
gravitas that comes along
yeah.
with trust
But
that, like, hey, this person knows what they're doing.
if you get at the very least have your general contractor picked out before you go into a lease
Okay.
negotiation, because they're going to tell you if you have enough air conditioning capacity, if you have enough power, all those things. Even if you spent 5 grand with a GC, which you shouldn't have to, but let's say you did,
Right.
it's the best 5 grand you'll ever
Okay.
spend,
Okay.
because that 5 grand, they may say, hey, this could be the best location in the world. It's going
Hmm.
to cost you an extra $250,000 to open it. So you
Right.
make the decision. Is it worth it to you? It may
Right.
be, but
Right.
at least you know. Um, so yeah. So then going into the financing piece, I'm a big fan of so if you're going into a lease situation,
Hmm.
the landlord's only going to finance so much. If you're a startup, unproven restaurant concept, you can count on maybe $70 a square foot in tenant improvement. But keep in mind, when you get money from a landlord, all they're doing is amortizing that into your rent payment.
Right. 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 Yeah.
They're taking a loan out on your behalf to finance that part of the business,
Right.
that part of your build out. And all that money has to be used towards the infrastructure of the building. So the landlord retains the value of that part of it. It's not for like your equipment. You can only
I get
use
it.
it
So
for
we're talking about
building.
$80 a square foot of tenant improvements that stay with the property. That
That yes, they're
these are
not
not
going with you.
they're not going with you.
So you're doing the landlord's work and then you're paying for it over the course of your
Yeah,
lease, right?
yeah.
You're improving their property. So I'm a bigger fan, and landlords will give you a much better rent deal. Like when I opened Molotong, I went to the landlord and he offered us tenant improvement money
Right.
and declined it. We said
Interesting.
we have, because we had already gotten our financing in place. We had the business plan done, the pro forma, we had everything laid out. We had a strong pedigree between myself and my partner.
Right.
The bank said we are good. And it was a small loan. It was like $300,000. But they said we're going to write you a $300,000 loan for 7 years. And so we were basically, it's like getting pre-approved for a car loan.
Hmm.
So now you're going out and getting your best deal, right? Because you're not negotiating. You know that you can buy it. So the benefit I had with that situation was I knew I had the financing in place when I went to the landlord, and we were up against other folks to get that space. And he said, I'll give you whatever it was, 60, $70 in TI. We said, we don't want any TI. Give us your best rent deal. And
Okay.
he
So
gave us, so the first 3 years rent was way lower than market
that's
because of that.
interesting. So by having the resources to not need the landlord's TI money, you were able to negotiate a sub-market rate, so a better rate
Correct.
than you could have gotten otherwise. So much so that you got a return on that 300 grand in a sense, like
Yeah,
because
because
you got to yeah,
you've taken the risk off of the landlord's
yeah,
shoulders and put it on your shoulders,
yeah,
but you have more control over what you're spending your money on.
yes,
No, I don't have to spend money on improving the landlord's property. I can spend money on improving, equipment or the decor or whatever I want to spend the money
right,
on.
right,
You have more control.
yeah. All right. That's very smart. Did you have your GC when you went into that landlord?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
well
And
done.
the broker I had for that was a GC.
Oh,
The
see.
broker I use now in Arizona is a restaurant owner. He owns
Okay.
restaurants. So to me, those are the types of people I look for. A lot of people get into brokerage because it's a great way for them to to do more and earn more without giving up their core business.
Yeah, yeah,
So, but anyway, so as far as financing, you want to bring your pro forma and your P&L and these plans to a lender that you know. I
Yeah.
wouldn't go to any of the big banks. They're not going to give you money. Restaurants are a high risk
Right.
investment for a bank. They are almost never, it's going to be very hard to find a bank that will write you a commercial loan for a restaurant. So you've got to find, just like we talk about local
Right.
first Arizona, you
Yes.
got to
Yes.
find a local bank. You got to ask other restaurateurs which banks lend to restaurants.
Right.
And you're going to always get better lending terms if you are going to go purchase the real estate. If you have
Yeah. Yeah.
experience in purchasing real estate, I would always put that down because you're going to get better terms. Like, for instance, a typical commercial loan for a startup restaurant, if you're leasing the space, there's no assets except for your personal assets. So if you have equity in your home, that's what the bank's going to attach to the loan.
Right.
You might be able to get a 5-year term, and let's say you're taking out a $500,000 loan, you might be able to get a 5-year term on that loan.
Yeah.
So it's going to be on top of your rent and everything. Now you've got this pretty significant debt payment.
Right.
Um, if you buy the building or buy the real estate that you're going into, then you're typically going to get a 25-year
Yes. Right.
amortized.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's a piece of collateral associated with
Yeah.
it that,
And then it's your rent
presumably.
payment.
Yes. Yes.
So you don't have rent because you own the building. You're
Right.
your own landlord.
Yeah.
You still write a lease to yourself because the nice thing is you can always flip the property to an investor and you still have that lease that you wrote in place.
Right.
So you're always going to get favorable terms and you have an escape mechanism,
Yeah.
a better exit plan if you own the property. And I
Sure.
will say I've learned that the hard way
Yes.
and I've learned it from mentors. And a recent company I operated for, the better part of 12 years, we made the income off of flipping real estate was just as good or better than the income we
Yeah,
made
yeah,
off of the
yeah. Well, I
restaurants.
mean, and
Yeah.
McDonald's has famously, thought of
Yes.
themselves as as a real estate company more than
Yes.
a restaurant company at times. Um, and one of the things that comes through in this conversation to me is the need for collective wisdom, and that this seems like a business that might gravitate people with strong, healthy egos might gravitate to because they might want to be associated
Sure.
as the restaurant owner and the cachet that comes along with that idea. This is my place, Sam in Morocco, right? Of all the gin
Right.
joints in all the world, here
Yeah.
we are in Casablanca. Um, However, it seems to me that the humility to make sure you are connected with domain specific expertise. Like general contracting is a level of expertise that doesn't happen overnight. You become a general
Sure.
contractor if you're a good one, having made lots of mistakes in the past, and so they bring to you experience that protect you from the mistakes that a person might make. But all of these things, even market research, all kind of speak to me about how to operate this dream, operate this business in the context of a community, that it's kind of not a solo there. You can't really be a solopreneur in to play at any scale in this business is kind of what I'm
No, yeah.
feeling.
I'm a big fan of opening with a good business partner that's going to bring value to your business. A business partner to me shouldn't just be somebody who has the financial resources to be your
Yes,
business
right.
partner.
Yeah,
They're going to bring expertise in a certain thing. Like maybe they're going to bring maybe they're a commercial real estate developer. So their expertise is going to be to help you find a great location, negotiate a great lease or a great purchase of a piece of real estate.
right.
And that's something that is going to be hugely beneficial to you when you go to open a second location if your first location is successful. Because the kiss of death is opening a second location when you have a
Yeah,
first great location. The reason is because here you are nurturing this business to be able to be self-sufficient. Likely you're going to get presented with lots of opportunities because you have this successful
yes, right,
looking
right. Yeah,
restaurant.
right.
So other landlords and developers, oh, you should come out to this. I'm building a new shopping center, this, that, and the other. So you
Yeah,
get lured in.
yeah. And that
You're not,
luring in is being invited to the shortcut. I mean, I
Yeah.
think what I'm hearing from you is that there are places that are very vi busy, but they're not necessarily successful. That anything that has a mismatch in it, mismatch the financing against the revenue, the community's wants versus the product served. That all of these sort of misses seem like poison pills. Like you get one of those things wrong, it's real easy for the restaurant business to come off its axis if you get just one thing out of whack.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the other hand, here you are stretching yourself out when you're trying to open a second location, and especially if it's more than 30, 40 minutes away driving,
Yeah,
then you're there's a high likelihood your first location is going to start going downhill,
right,
right? So it's not ready yet for you to leave it. So, but when you select a business partner to go into a restaurant, they should either have the expertise from a culinary, or maybe they're a accomplished mixologist or sommelier, and you're building your concept around that person, right?
right. Yeah,
Typically, it would be a chef or somebody if it's a let's say you're opening a taco joint, somebody who's accomplished in quick service restaurants and
sure.
has some experience in that, you know, with that type of food or that type of menu development. But um, if you're going to be the operator, you should pick a business partner that brings value besides financial resources.
And that's
Because,
yeah, that
yeah,
sounds so critical because depending on where you sit in that conversation, if you're the chef and you want to go get a business partner, you can't just go look for people with money. Like it's the money is the lubricant in this engine, but the pistons and the everything else you have to have that. Like you can't just have the
yeah.
lubricant. You got to have um
No, you got to have that. There's got to be added value to that investor. There's
yeah,
plenty of money out there.
yeah,
It's more about finding the right person that you want to go into business with
yeah,
and who's going to teach you and help you mitigate your risk, So,
yeah.
um,
Well, let's do this. This I feel like has laid the foundation for this is the framework. And then let's make this part one. And then let's do part two where we take this foundation and let's follow the story of one of your experiences from how did you develop the concept? How did and then fill in this framework with sort of your journey. But let's take our time with that, and we'll do it justice because this was fascinating for me, and I'm sure fascinating to everybody who,
well,
who
we've got
listens
some
to.
projects coming up that might we
I'm
might
I am
talk about.
so thrilled about. Let's look to the past and let's look to the future at the
Yeah,
at the same time. And equally important, how is that Arizona and a beer? It's
it's delicious, and
it's
I still remember your name. So it's working out
I was
great.
gonna say usually when you're talking to me, it helps to have a little bit of not NA, a little alcohol in the
No, it's great.
conversation.
I'm like, I'm drinking half of this beer and I don't even feel buzzed. So
Your system doesn't know what's going on. Well, listen, we haven't. We're going to have them on. Hopefully, have them on the podcast at one point in time. That beer comes from Arizona Wilderness. They got an amazing,
yes.
you know, they have amazing locations to go to, but they also have beer to take away, right? So you can go down and get some of their
Well, I am going to be meeting with John, who's the founder of Arizona Wilderness, in the next couple weeks,
perfect.
um, to talk shop. And so I'll definitely try to get a
Yes,
date
yeah,
lined up with
book
him.
them for crying out loud.
Yeah. They're
And
opening another location. I can't remember where, but
okay,
January.
okay.
So yeah,
Oh,
they're
excellent.
expanding.
Yeah. Well,
So which is cool.
I love what they're doing at the two that I've been to. I don't know if they have more than those two, but the one downtown Phoenix is amazing
Yeah.
uh, and the one out here by us.
No, they do a nice job.
And you mentioned the meat shop. And for those of you in the Phoenix area, if you have not been down to the iconic meat shop, please go down there. I didn't realize that they kept it to one beef a week, but they also do a good job of uh, in their freezer case where you can get that's pristine,
Oh yeah.
pristine meat down there in a way that I go down because it's a little bit of a drive for me. I'll go down, I'll get a bunch of things at once
Yes.
and bring it back. And And if you guys are listening, Meat Shop and Dave in particular, we want to have you on the show. So we've been reaching out. Hopefully we can coordinate with you guys soon as well. But Oren, I got to go find an Arizona myself here. And
All right. Well, hey, look, I got seven more in the fridge if you want to come pick one up. But
that sounds good. If I come over, tell that Diana, it's gonna, once we get chatting, it's gonna be a few hours. All right. Well, listen, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us here, and let's continue this conversation shortly.
it was a lot of fun. Thanks, Pete.